1995, and that stars Jeremy London, and oddly enough, his brother is in Dazed and Confused that we already talked about, and it
Yeah,
also stars Jason Lee.
yeah, Jeremy London, not to be confused with Jason London.
Yes, right.
And if you can't tell them apart, neither can I, because they're
Right.
twins.
Yes, exactly. So just a brief synopsis. Two friends who recently broke up with their girlfriends hang out at their favorite local shopping center. And that's very high level, but it is
dot,
what
dot,
it is.
dot, hilarity ensues.
Oh, God.
Yes,
Yes.
mine was two slackers hang out all day at the mall to blow off steam after their girlfriends dump them.
I mean, it is true.
It's
what
all it is.
Yeah, it
which,
really is.
which again, just like Clerks, it's essentially a movie about slackers hanging out, having funny conversations, and shenanigans. And in
Right.
this case, they went from the convenience store to the mall.
Right.
That's it. That's really it. He now has a bigger budget because this was, being financed by, I forget the production company. I want to say
remember.
Warner Brothers, because I don't think he was making movies for Miramax regularly yet. Gramercy, I was way off. Who knows? But yeah, so for this movie, I think he had about a $6 million budget, and he was like, $6 million? Why do we need $6 million? I made a movie for $27,000, to which the studio said that wasn't a real movie. And he was like, oh, okay. So so this one, and it's funny, it's $6 million, which is, exponentially more than his last one. And yet, in terms of a lot of the acting and stuff, sorry, I have a cat creating chaos over my shoulder. Besides besides the high budget and now they're in color and all that, there's still a lot of like bad acting in this movie. like the main stars are fine, but again, he peppers in like his friends and family throughout in like these little tiny roles, and a lot of them are like I don't remember if you or I don't know if you remember the scene where they're backstage of the game show, and the security guard is played by this woman who goes whatever, and like in this really exaggerated way. It was like the worst acting you've ever seen. But that's actually the script director that he just threw on camera for a minute.
Oh God.
Or the script supervisor or whatever, something like that. So it's more of that, which again is something that just keeps coming up in all his movies, as he loves putting his friends and family on camera. But
right.
Yeah, so that one was, as you said, it was Jeremy London, Jason Lee in his first major movie role, former professional skateboarder. At that time, he was actually a pro skateboarder that was trying to become an actor. Jason Mewes, and he and Jason Mewes reprised their roles as Jay and Silent Bob, which, fun fact, the studio desperately wanted him to cast Seth Green in the role as Jay. They didn't want Jason Mewes. And he ultimately, and Seth Green was like a hot item at the time. That was going to be kind of something to get people in the stands or in the seats too. And he ended up, or maybe he was an up and coming, funny guy or whatever it was, but he ended up actually like having to fly Jason Mewes out on his own dollar and putting him on camera. And like, he was basically like, dude, they do not want me to cast you. They don't want to give you your role as you. You have to crush this. You cannot flub a line. You have to like knock this out of the park. You're going to get one chance. And if you blow this, they're casting Seth Green. Right. And he showed up and he was like practiced and rehearsed. He had every line memorized and he nailed it. And the studio was like, okay, fine, he can do it. And he was like, thank God it's not Jay without Jay.
Right.
Like I can't even imagine what Seth Green would have been like. Like, I'm sure he would have been funny, but it wouldn't have been the same, It wouldn't have been the Jay that we all have come to know and love.
I agree. Yeah.
And then, of course, it has a whole slew of other people, some in big roles, some in, or, bigger roles than others, but there's Joey Llewellyn Adams, Michael Rooker, Ben Affleck playing, at that time, relatively unknown, but playing yet another big bully, which was like, he was kind of getting typecast at the time.
One of the biggest douchebags of all time, it seems like.
Right. Claire Forlani plays one of the girlfriends. Shannon Doherty, who was really, I think, the big name pull at the time. When they got her for the role, it was kind of a, put her on the movie poster kind of thing and get people into seats. Yeah. So the other big difference I would say between the fact that it's in color and set in a mall is that this movie, they trade in Star Wars references for comic books, and they lean heavily into the comic book references.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Before the MCU was a thing, and before Stan Lee was showing up in every, in 4 movies a year and cameos, Stan Lee shows up. And at the time, it was like, if you were a comic book reader, it was like, holy shit, that's Stan Lee. That's the Stan Lee.
Yeah. That's just, it's fucking great. I love it from the get-go. It's like all comic booky, and it's like Jason Lee is his character. Is it Banky or is it
Brody?
Brody.
Banky comes along chasing and chasing Amy.
Okay.
Yep. So this one's Brody.
Yeah, he's like this huge comic book fan. He's he's a video gamer and all this stuff, and it's like it's like I just absolutely love how, and obviously there's a point in the movie where they make Michael Keaton Batman reference where they're like Jay and Silent Bob are shooting grapnel over like onto the roof of the mall or something, and it's highly enjoyable. I
think they even take a line right out of Batman, right, when he says, "Where do you get all these wonderful toys?"
Yes.
Wasn't that in the movie?
Yeah, the Joker says it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing that really gets me though about this movie, I think, and what started to really pull me into the whole Kevin Smith universe was this was like the birth of really that View Askew universe, right? The tying the movies together, because there was one scene in the mall where she mentions Rick Darris, and if you remember, Rick Darris was the guy in Clerks with the weightlifting belt. That was the character Rick Darris. And so played by a friend of his or whatever, but like that was a connection. He used the same name, but I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that's the only one until, I shouldn't say until, because there was one before it in the movie, but the original screenplay and the original cut of the movie even really had this super long, like half-hour long scene at the beginning where they were at this like governor's banquet or something. And like chaos ensues. The main character screws up something for Michael Rooker's character, and that's why Michael Rooker hates him so much, and is trying to break him and his daughter up or whatever. But in test screenings, people complain that it's called Mallrats, but it takes a half hour to even get to a mall. Like these guys, the opening scene dragged out way too long, and it's on one of the special edition DVDs. You can watch it, or probably a couple of them, and it's really not a very good scene. You can see why they cut it out because it's too long. So they went back and they reshot that scene with him, or with Jeremy London and Claire Forlani in her driveway when he drives up and he's like going to take her to Florida. That was added basically to replace in a 2-minute scene the entire 30-minute sequence and get them to the mall quicker. So he shot that after the fact. They went back in post-production after the first one tested poorly, shot that, and he references the Julie Dwyer dying in the YMCA thing. That was the second reference that was a callback. And that was really the moment that he considers where the View Askew universe was born, where he was like, I want to keep doing this. This is funny. I just tied these two things. And like, it wasn't just referencing a name. It was referencing an entire, an entire off-screen scene that happened that played a part in that first movie, right? They go to her funeral at one point. So in this one, the fact that she died, you find out why she was swimming laps in the pool, and then it serves as a catalyst as to why Claire Forlani has to be in this game show of her father's, right? To take the place of the and again, I'm probably getting way too in the weeds here, but if you watch that scene when they're actually doing the game show, in a couple of parts, the set on Claire Forlani's side looks way darker and a little bit different, it's because they had to reshoot some of those scenes several months later to remove references to the governor's banquet incident at the beginning. And throughout the movie, there's a few spots where, like, I don't know what they call it in movie lingo, but like the voiceover or the sound, whatever, like, because, it's not always actually the characters that are talking on screen. What you're hearing isn't necessarily
you mean like ADR where they dub it in?
Yeah. There's a couple of scenes where it doesn't quite match up.
Right.
Or it's just zoomed out far enough that it's kind of hard to tell anyway. Like the guy in the parking lot who runs up and says, "Aren't you the guy who just broke up with so-and-so?" And he punches him. It was actually, he referenced the governor's banquet thing, and they had to dub in a different line.
Right
there. So there's like little things like that happen throughout the movie. If you watch it enough times, you'll catch them.
Right. Apparently, it's no doubt in my mind. So I guess I have to mention that Jason Lee is my favorite part of this movie, probably. I mean, like,
he steals the show for sure.
He's so great, and he has our particular moment I have to mention is he's sitting on this bench with, I think it's like the girl that's doing stories on
Trish the Dish.
Yes. So they're sitting on this bench, and he looks over and sees a child like sitting on the escalator, and he just goes off about this fucking escalator. It's like he's like,
yes.
I fucking love it. Like, it's one of my favorite moments. It's like he says, I hope his, oh no, that's right, they're going up the escalator. He's on the bench later.
Yep.
When he says the kid's back on the escalator again, but he says, like, he notices the kid, and he says, "I hope his pants get caught and a bloodbath ensues." And they're like, what? Like,
his buddy even says, like, "What is with you?"
Right. He's like, don't get me wrong, I don't wish the child any harm, but his mother should have to suffer that ordeal to learn how to manage her child. And it's like, oh my God.
Yes, later when he's on the bench, he looks over and he gets distracted, and he gets all angry. He goes, "That kid is back on the escalator again." And he keeps getting pissed about it until at one point you see a bunch of medics go running past saying, "There's an incident on the escalator."
Yeah. It's so fucking perfect. The I don't know what those things are called, those like magic eye things. The guy that's like
magic
staring.
eye posters,
Yeah.
Willem.
And like, it's funny because, like, for the longest time, I couldn't do them either. Like, I didn't know what the trick was. And I learned how to do the trick when I was working third shift and I had nothing better to do on my weekends. I learned how to see what was in the picture. And then ironically, I would like lose my eye like a year later. So like that skill completely went to waste. But, I mean, but it's still hilarious because it's like people keep walking up and almost instantly saying, "Oh, it's a sailboat." And he's like, "Damn it!" Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, Jesus. He's like so furious.
Don't forget the little kid though who says it's a schooner. Yes. He just says, "You dumb bastard." It's not a schooner, it's a sailboat.
Like, a schooner is a sailboat. Oh, God.
Yeah, played by Ethan Suplee in a great role.
Oh, yes. Ethan Suplee is his name, I forgot.
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, it's kind of like the customers coming into the quick stop. It's like you get little glimpses of all these friends around the mall that they all have their little quirks and things like that. I guess we mentioned Ben Affleck playing the asshole, right? But like so aggressively. So like he's such a bad guy in this movie. Like, I mean, I don't know what he had even been in. Like, I know he was in some after school special before this, but
he was in Dazed and Confused before it. He played a bully.
Oh, that's right. Right. He played O'Banion or whatever. Okay, yeah.
Yep. He played, as he says, he played literally the only unlikable character in that entire movie.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And was on his way to being typecast. until he got the movie or the role that we'll talk about in the next movie, which really was kind of one of his breaks. But yeah, one of the other things that I love about this movie, so besides, getting away from like the plot itself and everything, going back to like the dialogue that I think is really what early on was Kevin Smith's hook, was like really good dialogue and self-referential jokes and things that callbacks and things that came around. So like, the fact that, speaking of Ben Affleck's character, they keep using that phrase. He uses their vulnerability to screw them in a relatively uncomfortable place. And everybody says, what, like the back of a Volkswagen? Little things like that.
Right.
And if you watch that movie, and I think it's one of the reasons why we kind of always had it on loop, was not just, those little quips and the one-liners and the dialogue, but also it's full of Easter eggs, like little things. If you pay attention, and again, if you watch it 1,000 times, like we had it on, like I've said a million times, in the background in my dorm, like that whole freshman year, like at one point it looks like there's an Oompa Loompa on the set. Like somebody is literally dressed like an Oompa Loompa that's building the stage set. The gerbils sign in the pet store window, that harkens back to the story that he tells in the voiceover in the very beginning of the movie about his cousin Walter getting a cat stuck in his ass because he's trying to get the gerbil out.
Right.
And if you look at their clothes, like there's a Henry Hudson t-shirt, which is the high school he went to. There's a clerk's hat that Jeremy London puts on at one point when they go to the dirt mall, and he takes it off and he looks at it and he has this like look of disgust and throws it down. And then when they see Fanboy and Steve Dave, Walt Flanagan and Brian Johnson, when they see them in line at the comic book store and they get in that fight with him, and that's the first time you hear the line, "Tell him, Steve Dave," which comes up in multiple movies later and is now, by the way, side tangent. Those two guys have a podcast with Brian Quinn from Impractical Jokers that they've had since about 2009 or 2010. They're up over like 500 or 600 episodes at this point, and it's called Tell 'em Steve Dave, and it's just those guys. And I've been listening for like since about episode 7, I think, and it's my favorite podcast. But anyway, if you see like that, Walt Flanagan's character is wearing a View Askew hockey jersey. Even like Ben Affleck's character is Shannon Hamilton. Shannon Doherty had just gotten married to a guy whose last name was Hamilton. She didn't take his name because she was already a movie star, but had she taken his name, her name would have been Shannon Hamilton. And like, that's how they came up with that name. And just like her dress keeps changing in like every scene. If you notice, she's wearing a different dress.
I read something
sort
about
of
this,
similar, but different. In almost every scene, somebody is wearing a flannel shirt or like has a flannel shirt tied around their waist. Like constantly, there's flannel shirts everywhere. I mean, granted, it was 1995, but like it was like a thing that he kept putting into the scenes. There's a Degrassi Junior High jacket at one point that you see because he was a huge Degrassi fan. There's all these little Easter eggs throughout the entire movie, and I don't know that I had ever seen a movie at that time, me personally, that was filled with these little inside jokes. And then if you listen to the commentary, he'd be pointing them out. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, who does this? This is great. Right. Like, basically, and again, it's one of these characteristics that I think has again and again drawn me to Kevin Smith movies, is that as the filmmaker and, writer director, he's having as much fun making these movies as anybody watching them or working on them or whatever. Like, it's just like a playground for him. Like, he's just doing these things because screw it, I want to see this in my movie, so I'm going to do it,
right.
Which, like, I don't know. I find it very endearing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very cool thing to do. And it's just a service to fans as time goes on. It's just better and better because it's like, oh, hey, he did this, And
it makes so you can like catch little things on subsequent viewings, you keep seeing these little, I didn't catch that before. And like even the, Brody character is carrying around that little Dixie cup through the mall the whole time with Pop in it. That's directly, much like Clerks was written on, was inspired by real friends and events. The Dixie Cup and Mallrats in general was similarly based on like conversations he and his friends would have and things they would do. And so the Brody character was straight up based on Walt Flanagan. And apparently one time he picked up Walt to go to a comic book convention somewhere in New Jersey, and he got into the car with his little Dixie cup of pop, and he managed to like nurse it the entire time they were at the comic book convention. And so he just lifted that right out of real life and was like, here, have Brody carrying around this little cup.
Right.
So, these little things.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's pretty great. I guess the only thing I really wanted to mention, I don't really have anything else, is that I am not a particularly big fan of Claire Forlani or Shannon Doherty, especially in this. Like, I don't think their characters are particularly good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Claire Forlani is like she's like bland to me. Like, that's like the big drawback is it's like, I get it, he wants to go back to her, but I'm just like, she's also not that great. Like, I don't see what her appeal is. I don't know. I mean, that's my only major gripe is those two, and it's unfortunate because they're the two female leads. But like,
yeah, it's definitely, I think, and maybe I don't know, maybe this is just a reflection of the fact that like most of the writing is from his own experiences, and he's a dude that's a comic book nerd, right? So like maybe he doesn't write them that well in that sense.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
But I would say though that as you are wont to note in most of your other podcasts, I would note them both down as super hot in that movie.
They're good looking for sure. I won't deny that.
Yeah, I think they were both at their peak as well,
right.
20 something, movie stars, starlets, right?
Absolutely.
Like I said earlier, Shannon Doherty was like straight up a draw for the movie. When they got her to do the movie, it was like a get, right?
Right.
So yeah, I would definitely say, speaking of cons, kind of some of the acting by some of the non-leads. But other than that, I mean, it's an imperfect movie, but there's not much bad I have to say about it, really. I just find it like endlessly enjoyable. And the pros, I mean, it's genuinely funny. I think it's as light as it should be. It doesn't get quite as dark as Clerks gets. I mean, Clerks really gets dark in a couple of spots.
It does.
Right?
Yes.
It really gets dark. But this is like, it's endlessly quotable. It's super rewatchable. And so, I mean, even though, like I said, I can't deny it's a flawed movie. And it, just something about it, maybe it's just because I've seen it so many times, but I just love that movie. So I give it a B+. I won't quite give it an A, even though I like it so much, because I think objectively it's hard for me to, but I feel like giving it a B is being unfair to it, considering how much I enjoy it. So I settle on B+.
Yeah. Well, I gave it a B. I too really enjoy this movie. Obviously, a lot of great comedy in it. It is like deliberately cheesy in a lot of ways, and I like that he kind of went all in on some of that stuff, and it's like it really,
it's kind cheesy in the right way, right?
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah.
It makes the movie different. Like, it's not like a bunch of other movies that I've ever seen. That the way people behave and the dialogue and things like that, it's different. But I mean, I really do. I enjoy it. Aside from, as I mentioned, the whole Claire Forlani and Shannon Doherty, just not my cup of tea. But yeah, I give it a B rating. Brandon at Random Reviews artwork, theme music, and podcast are written, performed, recorded, engineered, directed, and produced by Brandon Griffes in association with Brandon at Random Reviews Entertainment.